All right, we're live. We're live. We're live. My show is actually was scheduled for 5:30. I had a few little technical things going on, but we got it together. That's how it is with a first live session. You know, I'm talking. I'm all about transparency. So first live session didn't get off the way I wanted it to, but I am here now, and that's all that matters. I like going with the flow, so it is all good. Trust me. So this is the first session of the CWC Book Club read. We're talking about the book, The Demonology of King James the First. That's my first book in my book club read, and for the book club read. And I tell you, this book is so interesting, and I shared a little bit about it the other day, and I wanted to kind of go into it more in detail today, and basically spark conversation. The biggest part about it is I wanted to be able to grow a book club. I've always wanted to have a book club, and I always wanted to be, I've been a part of many different book clubs, but I always wanted to kind of spearhead one because I want to be the one in charge of the books. In so many ways. I've enjoyed book clubs I've been in the past, but sometimes, I don't know, we did like the round robin sometimes, or we would put the names in a hat, and then we would come up with something. And not that the books were books I did not want to read, but it was just that I thought that I want to have a different, I don't know, a different direction. And, I'm really into the metaphysical thing, and I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it. I think that is kind of somewhat at times a little bit daunting. I think people want to, it's standoffish. People don't really like to get into it, and I do. But then I found that there is a community out there who loves the conversations that have to do with mysticism, magic, and metaphysics. So I think that once you start really diving into an arena, then the people will come, and the conversations will come, and the whole scenario will be set, the scene will be set so that you can move forward in that thing. So this is exciting. I wanted to send a special shout out to all of my YouTube gurus, I like to say, those who have been my inspiration. I mean, through the years, who I've watched, and they have always been able to help me on days when I felt like, okay, I was all alone in this, or I didn't have anyone who was thinking like me. And just as I would think those type of thoughts, here comes a video that will come up into my feed, and it would be just what I would need. So I really want to send a shout out to those people out there who have helped me through the years to stay grounded in my my walk, and what I feel is my destiny call. It's just it's really surreal to be able to think of an idea, then implement it, and then see it taking off and going into the direction you wanted it to go in. This feels really good. It's really exciting. I was getting a little emotional the other day when I was just thinking about the different platforms that I had established, I put together, and then having people to engage. Those who are like-minded as well as those who are not like-minded. I'm just going to be honest with you. I've had a lot of different people come onto the platform that are not really feeling me when it comes to the mysticism, magic, and metaphysics, especially speaking in the King James Bible, because of how there is I don't know, there's just this witch hunt mentality when it has to do with anything that is traditional Christianity, especially the King James version of the Bible and the King James Bible. So that is one of the reasons why I wanted to put together this particular book club read within the CWC Book Club, because it kind of speaks truth to what I've thought all along. I feel that anytime something is an obsession for you, or a person, that it's a soft spot, and there's a reason for it. So as I was able to do some research and dig into the background of King James, I was able to find that this very king actually had some altercation with some with witches, you know. And I don't know why every time I say that I always want to bust out laughing. I don't know why, but it's like he was having some altercation, and you know, what my feeling is that there had to be a background or some kind of history. History doesn't really, as we know, it doesn't give you a full grasp of what was going on. You just hear that he was going back and forth with these witches, and they were trying to cast spells on him and his fiance at the time, and then he went back and forth with them, and then all of a sudden, him being in a position of power, he started to write laws and put them on the books that was meant to eradicate the witches, you know. And I thought that was extremely interesting. And then I guess I had several questions as to how did King James come in contact with these witches. I mean, my opinion is that there had to be some background with them, you know, between them. So if you are running a certain circle, in my opinion, you probably came across these witches. Were you once a member with them? And I don't want to point fingers, because, you know, you're left with so much intrigue, of course, with this. You know, there's left with a lot of questions, rather. And then it's also intriguing to think of this experience that was, you know, written down in history. And then it makes you wonder, and makes you ask questions, and makes you really have to put your own stories in there, which you shouldn't do, because your imagination can run wild. Because I'm a writer, I will run wild with the story. Maybe I'll just put it in a book. But you know, just back to the questions of it, I really feel like what was the circumstances surrounding this whole rift between King James and these witches? What happened? Why were they trying to cast spells on him? Why were they trying to actually bring harm to? So he thought. Now let's just go back to that. This was all perception, possibly. We don't know for sure. Could it have been perceived that they wanted to do something to him? Maybe he had this fear, and hence the fear factor when you think about the way that these scriptures are written within the Bible. I mean, it's requesting bodily harm on another individual. And all for none other than the fact that these particular women and men, if you want to say that, were choosing a certain spiritual path. So you got to kind of wonder about that. I choose a spiritual path, and all of a sudden I deserve death. And then there was thoughts and conversations about the way that they would practice what they practiced, the witchcraft, so to speak. So there were conversations about that between King James and, let's get into the read, King James and two entities. Okay, this is a part of it. So first of all, the book, of course, once again, is called The Demonology of King James. And I'm just going to pull up something on it. But it's The Demonology of King James. And it talks about how King James had a conversation. And this conversation is with two entities. So these particular entities, well, they were, let's just say they were spirits. I don't know how else to put it. But the book is called Demonology. Even his book, the original work that he put together, was called Demonology. So within the consultation, the demons are actually speaking to King James, and this is his own personal account, and giving him what seems to be consultation about how the act of witchcraft occurs. So what is done in spell work, and what their take on what it means. This is the work that King James put out. So this book, The Demonology of King James I, is written by Donald Tyson, and it goes into great detail about the conversations that the personal conversation that King James says that he had with these two entities. This book, now I'm not going to get too deep into explaining it, because I want to be able, since I've just announced this book club read, I want to be able to have discussions with people surrounding the book, so I won't get too much into the introduction and even reading it word for word. I don't want to do that, but I do want to share that once people get caught up, and I would say more so the next episode, next week on Thursday, my live episode, I'm going to get more into what the conversation was. I'm going to give my take on it. I'm actually going to give the names of these particular entities because King James actually gave them names, which is so interesting. Names, yes. So these conversations were going on between the personal conversation between King James and these two entities, and they had names. This is so intriguing to me. I know that there are a lot of other people who are interested in this as well. So this is the perfect book club read, and I get to choose it. Yay! I get to choose it, and this is just how I wanted to move forward within this book club. Okay, first we'll have the live sessions on Thursday. Then I'm going to open up several. Now, I'm on different social media platforms, but there's one platform in particular I want to open up so that we can have discussion and chats about it. So we're just going to go into certain topics. We're going to start a thread, and I'll provide a link for that thread later on during this upcoming week. But that's the choice that I want to, as far as like the thread, that particular choice, I'm going to leave that kind of open. But there's a few threads I have in mind to do the chats and have discussion. And then once I have these discussions, then we're going to have those particular questions or discussions brought up here on the live podcast regarding the CWC Book Club. And then we're just going to, we don't have to name names unless someone says that I can use their name, but it's just about the discussion. That's what I want to open up here. And the next part of it, of course, is to address certain other concerns that people have with the whole aspect of demonology and where we are today. So that is a part of the conversation I want to have as well. So those are some bullet points that I want to put out there so that we can have a direction and then move forward with it. And of course, I want us to have fun. Reading books to me is actually a nice little getaway. It's a way to relax. It's a way to go into another world. This world it'll do in a pinch, but for the most part, I like to have an out. I like to have a retreat, and this is one of my favorite ways to do it. And I want to invite other people as well. Now, one thing about it, I know that this first book read on demons. I know people might think, why are we talking about demons? Well, you know what? I really feel that first of all, it's an interesting topic. That's the first thing. Next, I feel that it's lost its traction in society today. I know that I talk a lot about the 70s because that was the era that I really grew up in, my impressionable years, if you want to say that. And one of the things that was really big for me is that I was a part of a church that was under like sanctified religion, and we did a lot of spiritual warfare within the church. That included Terry service with altar calls. So we had altar calls, we had Terry service, we had casting out of demons, we had people at that point they had testimony service. So we had people who had conversations about, their testimonies rather, about their experiences with angels and demons. So this is something that I have a background in and that I have roots in, and I want to have a discussion, here in the now, because it's just not things that people talk about anymore, and I sometimes wonder, would that stand the reason why it seems like the world has gone crazy, for lack of a better word. It just seems like there has been just an onslaught of all kinds of mayhem, confusion, chaos, and does that have anything to do, and honestly, let's just backtrack a bit. It seems like it's always been like that, but really at this day and age, it's like it's not getting any better. So let's put it that way. Is it supposed to get better? We don't know. We don't know. But I think that the discussion, at least thereof, is a good way to kind of like, start directing our minds towards something that possibly could help. How could it help talking about demons and angels? Well, I think it can help if people can start realizing about how they can get to know and get control of the shadow self. Yes, the shadow self. That has something to do with demons as well. The demons within, that proverbial, and again, I mentioned it before, that angel on the right shoulder and a demon on the left. if we can get more control of ourselves, own up to things that we know that maybe it wasn't the best idea for our destiny and path, maybe we should have had other decisions when we made certain choices, that is the way that we should want to go in order to have a greater good that will occur for ourselves and for the ones who are coming up behind us, our children and our children's children. This is something that we have to have discussions about. So when we talk about demons and angels, well, some people might say, oh, this is make-believe, this is fairy tale, this is just mythology. Well, I tell you, every culture from my understanding throughout the globe, all over the planet, has their own mythologies. It helps them to wrap their mind around life, everyday, actions, the way that they move forward within those actions, for themselves, for their families, for society as a whole, and whether or not they are considering themselves to be educated in institutions of higher learning, or whether or not they're just the local griots and the grassroots type of energies and people and families and so on and so forth, whether or not that is something that is their actual practice to tell stories, or whether they have griots, I don't know. But I tell you one thing, there are people within societies and villages and cities and towns and hamlets all over the world that have stories, they have lives, and they make decisions from their experiences. So if we can get to a place where we all recognize our experiences, and this is maybe my lofty ideas, I'm on my soapbox, but we get to a place where we recognize our decisions, recognize how we have come to get to our current standing, where we're going in the future, and what we can do as far as like making it better for all, for the whole, for the greater good. Okay, that's lofty, I know. Okay, I'm off the soapbox, y'all. I think that the demonology aspect of it is that people think that all of this energy is outside of themselves. They have nothing to do with their outcome. They have nothing to do with their destiny, because there's some devil out there with the little pitchfork and the horns on his head, and they're looking for me. It's like the boogeyman and the boogie woman and the things that go bump in the night. And I think if we take more realistic approaches and say to ourselves, okay, you know what? I have a lot to do with the outcomes of my given choices. If I can make this decision, make that decision, then I will move forward and be able to help myself. Okay, if anybody else but myself. People find themselves in a lot of situations where it can be considered sticky wicket. And sticky wicket is just when you get into things and you say, oh, wonder why this happened. Maybe the devil made me do it. And I know that's like an old joke. That's like an old joke when people say the devil made me do it, because people don't want to own up to their own choices and moving forward in their lives. So this is the conversation that, it stems from a very, like I said, there was my experience, my life, things that happened to me as I grew up, the impressionable years of my life, and I think that it's something that can help others. Now, I have a half a century in this world, okay, and I know I'm gonna throw around my age as the authority of it all, but I've been here, I've been around. This ain't, as some people say, this ain't my first rodeo. So I know that there is some wisdom in which some people can glean from. So I share here. I share my belief, I share my experiences, and I share what I believe can help others in their walk. And if you take it, well, good. If not, that's your choice as well. But at least you'll have a place to come. And I want to believe that this is a place where you can come. You can get a chance to, I want to say, open up. You can be around like-minded people. That's what I wanted to put together in the first place. That's really what this was all about. It kind of grew from that thought process. I started on one platform, and then I started seeing other platforms where I can come and branch out and join with other people, build a circle, build somewhere where people can come and they can actually feel that they're not alone, feel that they're not going to be shunned, feel that they're not going to be ridiculed, because they have these understandings and thoughts about what it is that we deal with on a daily basis and what we have dealt with. Now, this single important topic, which is that of how we move forward and we move through our shadow selves is all about this experience with King James. And King James and this work that he put out called Demonology. And if we get to the place where we can talk about it again, which a lot of people are, a lot of people want to come into these type of circles and have these discussions. If not for themselves, maybe someone that they know, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a co-worker. Have these discussions, because I really believe, now this is my belief, again, 50 years, I believe that the whole epidemic with this new breakout of the drug, now they're making a lot of these illegal drugs now legal. Why do people need so many drugs now? The whole epidemic of the opioids. Why do people need so many drugs now? I've heard people say to me personally that they use drugs because they don't want to see things, or they don't want to hear things, or they don't want to feel things. And that's something that we need to really think about. We have these epidemics. This is something that we're ignoring because, some people want to go on with their lives. They want to go on shopping. They want to go on watching different things on these social media platforms that maybe they shouldn't be watching. They want to go on with their lives as if nothing is really happening as a greater on a greater scale. But everyone is being affected, whether you believe it or not, because there's a collective consciousness. So when you think about a collective consciousness and how you and the ones around you are being affected by it, then you can see why so many things seem that they're not working like they used to be. I remember, this is interesting, because I remember a time when customer service was exquisite. It was actually something that was excellent. And now it's like you can't get any help anywhere. You go places, people are preoccupied. They're not really into what they're doing. It seems like people don't have any hobbies anymore. I had a conversation with someone the other day about where are the people who are building pyramids, and and I know that's something that's ancient technology and it's ancient architecture, but where are the people who are going to be the builders of tomorrow, the artists, the composers, the writers, the authors? I mean, we're looking at people. And I saw there was a one particular show. It was actually on one of the social media platforms where this guy, he actually got into it was either a mailbox or a newspaper holder, and he thought that was an accomplishment. And I looked at that and I said, wow, this is his best idea of what he should be doing right now, and it's an accomplishment to be able to fit his body inside of a newspaper holder, a dispenser. The type of mindset now that my take on it is that have anything to do with demons? Well, I feel that when people are able to account for themselves, to take account for themselves and feel like, oh, there is a purpose in my being here. There is a reason why I was placed here in this time right now for such a time as this, and it's for a greater good. How can I make the world better? Maybe there's some disease I can cure. Maybe there's something that I can create or invent to help someone who can't walk or can't see or things like that. How can we make this world better? Now it's like I listen to a lot of the statistics of all of the people, even in the school system. They want out of the school system. They want to homeschool. They want to get away from the school system. Where are we going? When the fabrics of society is crumbling all around you, you have to start thinking, how can I take account for something? Are all the people watching TV? Are all the people in the position of not really listening? I guess you're listening to me right on a social media platform right now. But when you turn it off, what are you going to do? Do you have hobbies? Do you have crafts that you do? Do you have some type of trade or skill? Okay, this is something that we need to talk about. So it's about dealing with yourself and who you are supposed to be in the world. Then we get back into demonology. We get back into the aspect of knowing about the shadow self. It's nothing to be afraid of. So I'm going to talk about this a little further because I started talking about this in my first podcast about how we take into account what is a demon. Okay, what is a shadow self? How do we deal with a shadow self? These are the things that we really want to think about. We want to give ourselves a chance to be with the shadow self, not be afraid of it. So my take on the shadow self is a place of, well, let me just back up a bit. I had a conversation with someone talking about their this demon thought process, and they said that I was a daughter of Satan because I said that I was a modern Christian witch and mystic. And I'm like, okay, now what does Satan look like? Okay, so they didn't give me an answer, and I said, okay, I've seen it drawn before, what people's depiction of what the proverbial devil is, what the proverbial Satan is, and it was a lot of ugly characters out there. And I brought this up on my first podcast. I've seen some ugly, I mean heinous looking demons on the depictions from people's minds. And I'm thinking, I have never even fathomed something that looked like that. Not that I'm just such a goody two-shoe, because I honestly goody two-shoes. I remember I was in doing a prayer in a prayer closet about myself, and I was like, what am I portraying to the world right now? And I saw that clown, the it clown. So, I guess it depends on what energy you're in at a given moment. But I want to basically recognize and help people to see that, or recognize for myself and help other people to see that whatever your depiction of this demon is, this gentleman I was talking to on one of my social media threads, we were kind of like going back and forth in the chat in the thread, and he was saying I was Satan's daughter. I'm like, okay, now what does that look like? And then he says, I don't know what it looks like, but I'm like, okay, so let's think about this. Are you talking about something fictional? Is this real? Are we taking someone else's thoughts and making that our own? We are talking about mindsets. We're talking about things that are within our mind. And people depict it, they characterize it, and they put it on paper sometimes. And this is what's actually helping them to form thoughts about moving forward and the choices that they're making. And if it looks that heinous, that ugly, what kind of choices are they making? Or are they choosing to get on the local pharmacist list for opioids? Okay, this is something that we have to think about. Is this why this epidemic is so high? I don't have the statistics, but I remember reading an article, and the article this made me feel so bad for people. I just stopped reading it. I didn't even want to take the statistics in my mind. You will be amazed at the number of people who are using opioids as a form of a get away, get out. So they can't think of the next level of a really high level of composing a song or creating some structure, or architectural structure, or building a city, or thinking of some business idea. The only thing they can think of is just taking them down in pills or drugging out or whatever the case might be. What is going on in the world? Are they seeing something in their minds? Are they feeling something? Are they hearing something? What are they hearing? Is this their own personal demons that they haven't dealt with? You will be amazed that if you don't deal with certain things in your life that actually have been a choice that you could have made, or a choice that other people made that it affected you, but how did they get into your circle in the first place? Those type of things are what's going on, and the reason why people are having these experiences. So we look at the story within the book Demonology of how King James, within his first this particular work, within his first several paragraphs, said, okay, I'm talking to you, and you're wondering who. It is two entities. He's talking to the first one, and again, he's named them. We'll talk about them on this next week on the next podcast number 3. With this from the CWC Book Club, but he names them, and the conversations to me, and just getting back into it, the conversation seems like one of the entities. Now this is kind of different, and at first I thought it was a little spooky, but I stayed with it, and I don't want to scare anyone off, but it's intriguing, honestly. It gets better, but it starts off saying, I'm talking to these entities. Now the personality on the one entity I notice is more laid back, and that one speaks a little bit more to reason. The other entity is very aggressive, I noticed, and you'll notice it too when you start reading it. And they both kind of give the King James certain insight, and again, it's a consultation. It sounds like a consultation. It sounds like King James needed to know certain things to move forward in a certain work, and that's why when you hear and you read about it in lots of the information that I researched, it seemed like the premise was that King James would be able to then carry out these particular acts against certain ones he thought who were witches. And there were forms of torture that was just terrible. The forms of torture that he used. And also the way that, now this is what I'm researching and what I've seen, is that the way that he would make certain people, ones that he thought were witches, he would make them confess to things. Confess to things like actually being in the, I think one of them says that he, and again, I didn't go completely into the story. I'm actually still on the introduction of parts of it, and I skimmed through the book just to read certain portions of it. But in the introduction, it talks about how he made some of the witches confess that they had actually been with the devil and they had kissed the devil's butt. Okay, now this was interesting to me. I didn't know what to do with that one. I was like, okay, so he's making them confess to certain things. Now, you can imagine, and maybe you can, maybe you can't, but imagine if someone was torturing you. I mean, the type of torturous acts were things like, he or someone that was with him would stick a dagger, just a sharp object, into what was considered a birthmark or a mole or whomever he thought was a witch. And then if it, now get this, if it did not bleed, if this particular birthmark or mole did not bleed when they stuck a knife into it or set a sharp object, then that meant that it was a mark of the devil and that they were actually a witch, and then they would be thrown in jail. And at that time, and this is what I researched regarding the laws on the books at that time. At that time, there was a laws put in place by Queen Elizabeth, who was the one who was the queen just before King James took the throne in England. Now, mind you, just as a sidebar, King James was the king in Scotland, the fourth king in Scotland. He was actually the one who was in charge of England once Queen Elizabeth was no longer there. So the books had to be changed by King James, and before King James changed the books for the laws regarding witches, it did not allow them to just immediately be hung or burned at the stake. There were things that had to be proven and things of that nature. So my take on it is that in the beginning, and because I did the research, he had to have them confess so that he could even bring them to trial, which that is very interesting. But then after a while, he changed the laws to say that, oh, you can just all burn a witch at the stake. There was no need for any proof. So that was what really was another controversial thing about that time. So when we look into these tortures that happen, things of that nature, we get to the place of wondering, okay, now, what was the real purpose of this? Did this go back to the rift that you had with these witches? Or is this something you were trying to do to rid the world of some evil? I mean, in my opinion, when a person goes all out, and I'm back to King James now, goes all out to eradicate anything, it seems to me that it should have been something that was going to harm the greater populace, or something that was not going to be beneficial to society as a whole. So we look at the different acts, and it never, and this is interesting, the different acts that were occurring, they said that, oh, the witches were dancing in the cemetery at the church with the devil. Okay, they never really said anything in particular that these people were doing to harm anyone else. So that was always questionable to me. Okay, so there's nothing that's going on necessarily that's harming people as a whole, society as a whole. So what is this really about? Why are you torturing these women and trying to make them to confess to something as being a witch, and you know that it's illegal, and then all of a sudden you're going to put them to death in various ways? One way, of course, was by what? To hang them by the neck, and until they were dead. And then after that, now this is a little graphic, so I'm just going to warn people beforehand. And then he would also burn them at the stake. So these are things that were occurring, but then we go back to why was it happening? Especially when you hear in the beginning, even before the work was done, that was demonology by King James. Why were you in this altercation, or why was there a rift between you and these witches? Why were they trying to take your life? What was this about? Is this your own personal history? Is this something that is a personal vendetta? Now you have this book out, and now the work that was done by with demonology was actually the work just prior to when King James authorized and published the King James Version of the Bible. Yes, which is also definitely anti-witch. And still to this day, I have people saying things on my social media platforms. In my opinion, that's a threat to my life just because of my spiritual beliefs. And yes, I did choose to say which I use that as a way of a radical change, a radical movement, so that we can bring a attention to these atrocities that have happened to women in the past, men in the past, who just want to have their own spiritual practice. I want to make sure that this is brought to the present so that we will not forget and we will be able to have these spiritual freedoms. So how do we do that? How do we do that? We change our mindsets, first of all, and we get into a place where we form these type of circles, these forums, so that we can have discussion and conversations with like-minded people. Now, as I mentioned before, I always say I welcome all guests to my social media platforms. Well, lately, I'm going to say, I'm going to have to actually bring some of that and, put it under the microscope for myself, because there's some pretty radical people. They still have this same mindset, a mindset of, I had one comment that said, Paul said death to witches, and they put it all in caps. I said, and in a joking way, I said, well, and then it said something about we rebuke this demonic lady or something. Like, okay, now this is interesting. How old is this person? But that's neither here nor there. I mean, I didn't really you have to look at that. Is that a threat? Is that something where if we were in face-to-face, would you try to come at me? I don't know. But I tell you, it really incites some interesting emotions in people when you are just on your own path and you want to make your own decisions about your spirituality, all from the works of this book and the conversations that were had between King James and these two entities. So this is actually pretty old. This book was written in 1597, the Demonology of King James I. The Demonology, the original work of Demonology, was written in 1597. The Demonology of King James I is actually from 2012. It's in paperback. It's also in Kindle form. Hopefully you can go to my website, which is Bible Magick 8.com. That's Bible Magick, Magick, the numeral 8.com. Purchase the book, and we will be able to have further discussion. Now, next week, I'm going to go into a full-on discussion, and we're going to break down the aspects of the book that have to do with these two entities, and we're going to name the entities next week. Again, I just want to have people to get a chance to purchase the book. I just announced this as of last week that we have this new book club, the CWC Book Club. So I want to give people a chance to get a hold of the book. I want to post to some more of my platforms, my social media platforms, so that people can get in on this and we can grow our circle of like-minded people who enjoy talking about mysticism, magic, and metaphysics, who are making a switch. And I don't want to necessarily say switch that something was bad, because honestly, I enjoy my traditional. I'm just going to say this. I had to stop a little bit, but I'm going to say this. I enjoy my experience as a traditional Christian. I feel that now to be in a position of being one who studies the King James Bible no longer from just a literal translation, but one who studies from a metaphysical translation, I think that that's a next level. I think that in 2019 we need to be on this particular level so that we can move forward in the current climate and the way society is going right now. We need to be able to no longer think that, oh, Jonah was actually swallowed by a whale, or oh, Eve was actually talking to a serpent. We need to not think like that anymore in respect to how we move forward and how we use that, what is considered the meta realm, which is the metaphysical realm. There's a physical side, and then there's a spiritual side. We need to get into the position of understanding in more depth the spiritual side, if we want to move forward and be on a different conscious level by the time we get to Lionsgate 2019. So there is some tie into that we're going to discuss on different platforms, but to have a different state of consciousness is where we are going in this time. And this is the word, the now word for a now time, for a now people, for such a time as this. So let's continue the book club read. Again, this is more introductory to it. I want to give people a chance to get the book and have an open discussion. I want to be able to go on forums to get questions and then have discussions that I'm going to then bring to this live podcast so that we can open this up full circle. I see this actually going global. I don't just see this as being, oh, just here in the States. I'm in the States, in the U.S. I want to be able to see this going global. I want people to have this discussion, and then also not just this, those who are considered to be Christians. I want people in other denominations with other belief systems to be able to chime in. That's what I want to see, because this is all about us all getting to another level and moving forward past the last 400 plus years. I think that we've been in the same position for 400 years. Everything must grow. Everything must grow. That shows a sign of life. That shows that you're actually moving on, and there's going to be fruit that comes from you and why you were here and alive in this day and in this age. So let's make a difference. Let's make something that grow, that's positive. And like I always say, think, know, and grow. That is important so that you, not only you will benefit, but the world will benefit. And we are going to believe, and I know they've been wanting this for a long time, and maybe I have lofty ideas. I don't know. But I tell you one thing, it's not a bad thing. you can't never say that. If a person wants progress, it's not a bad thing. It's just something that we all need to work toward and be able to give ourselves a position that is something that we can, hang our hats on, as they say. Somewhere where we can have respite, being able to retreat. What's wrong with feeling good? I have this coaster, and I've seen it in different places that say, it's a good day to have a great day. All right. Even my little mug today, I had to put this mug together. First of all, one side says blessed. The next one says too blessed to be stressed. And I know people have heard that before, but I love this saying. I love it because it's something that we all need to think about. And then once we get into these circles with people who are like-minded, hey, let's go for the like-minded people. Bring them on. I have people who are coming on, and again, they're religious zealots, and they're saying things like, oh, you shouldn't do that, and suffer a witch not to live. That is a favorite scripture. Oh, my goodness. If I hear that scripture one more time, I told this person, I said, I was going to make this point. I told this person on my site, they were like, okay, Paul said death to witches. I said, well, did you tell Paul? Tell Paul, I'm from the west side of Chicago. Okay, y'all, I digress with that. But, all kidding and joking aside, this particular book is going to help us to get to another level. Once we start recognizing a shadow self and not be afraid of that shadow self and work with that shadow self, then we'll find our destiny in that. We really will. And when we bring it back home, because if you have a greater thought process of a greater good, then you can bring it back home. If you're thinking good for all, then you think good for yourself. All of these different things, these dead-end experiences that you might have that you feel is not the best, once you start thinking in a position of how can I make a greater good, then you'll bring a greater good to yourself. And I believe in that. I really do. We're in a position where we have these certain mindsets, and many people around us have these mindsets. If we can get to a position where there is a collective, now there's a collective consciousness. Once the collective consciousness opens up and people are no longer in a position of being, I would say, put in a box. I know that's maybe they've been using that a long time, put in a box. Then we'll be able to move forward out of this whole box mentality and expand. And this is the era. It's all about timing. Trust me, it's all about timing. When it's the proper time, then things can happen. We had an era and a period of time and an age where we were supposed to be under this particular energy. Hey, now we're moving into the next dimension. And if you want to be on the right level, you're going to get with this, getting on that inner demon, whatever it is, working with the shadow self, and it's going to be able to catapult you into your future. And not just your future, but the future of you, your family, your circle, everyone you come in contact with. So again, this is Bible Magick Maven, Jae L song, and I hope you will tune in next week for our next live show. It's going to be next Thursday. Time to come. I'm going to tell you, I don't put times on things. I put it on when I know my schedule. So you guys just keep looking back on the social media platform of your choice. And until next time, always think, know, and grow. I'll see you in the lessons.